Hello, thanks for checking out What If New Mexico, a podcast exploring multiple angles and possibilities for people living with a disability in New Mexico. Every episode unravels different experiences to guide a conversation about inclusivity and diversity in the land of enchantment. We ask, what if it is possible to include everyone in all aspects of life? Each episode will share real conversations with people living with a disability in different communities across our state. We'll stir up dialogue to inspire a future of New Mexico that includes everyone. Join us every Friday for a new episode.
Hi, it's What If New Mexico. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Star.
We're here to imagine what if we truly tried to acknowledge our unique needs in learning and in work environments, all the way to social interactions. What if we respected everyone to express life despite religion, culture, ethnic background, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical and mental ability? So in the last couple of episodes, we've covered topics about communication and getting help. And in this fourth episode, our topic is centered on work and contributing to our communities. People living with disabilities are at higher risk for living in poverty. The highest groups it affects are elderly people and people living with disabilities, which sometimes elderly people are people living with disabilities. And both groups are at risk for living in poverty due to physical, medical, and something as easy as transportation reasons. Income for SSDI recipients are below the poverty guidelines, and SSDI stands for Social Security Disability Income.
For tax purposes, the IRS defines disability as not being able to earn enough money to live. Most of us see disability more broadly than that, and we still want to contribute even if we can't earn money. So in this episode, we're dealing with three interrelated topics. One is doing work, in other words, what you do with your time. Two is getting paid or not getting paid. And three is contribution towards the greater good. So Jen, what are your experiences with having jobs and working?
When I was able to drive regularly, I was able to find work. I was working a lot of freelance jobs. One of the reasons why I qualified for benefits was because I was no longer able to work. On top of that, yes, medically, I was not able to. And yeah, I got a taste of that. I at first it was like, no work, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I can't move forward.
Yeah. So for me, I didn't qualify for benefits, but I've gone through periods of like alternating between getting paid a lot and being like a really valuable. And then I'd go through a long period of unemployment. So that's kind of an unusual trajectory because I couldn't prove that I couldn't get work because I had the history of getting, highly paid work. But that's how disability is. It's on and off, or it's just it's partial, and it's kind of unpredictable for me.
I can totally relate to that, especially when I knew I could do a job. I just needed some of the job to be reimagined so that I could do it. And usually that meant not early hours. And then also just letting me work from home. If the job could let me work from home, then please let me. And this was before COVID, where now everyone are flexible to work at home. But before COVID, it was like work at home. We can work, but having a disability might make work look different, or the execution of work look different.
Right.
So talking about all that, let's start by hearing some of our stories and reflections on working in regular paid jobs.
A couple months ago, these airmen were here from Afghanistan, and there were like a lot of troops, and there were like stacks and stacks of dishes. And if I don't get help, I get overwhelmed. I like working hard. I'm a hard worker. Because when I had all those dishes, I had to like stay late, like stay till 9:30 every day to work, and I like that.
I've never identified exactly with being disabled because I was financially able to work. I mean, in order to work, I spent many years completely shut down, kind of personally. I just tried to focus on surviving work, although in some ways I kind of regret those working years when I was so shut down. That was not a good life. And also because I had a son with disabilities who were more significant than mine, who had a lot to contribute and needed my support in ways that I wasn't particularly good at, but I really had to focus on. He just needed some organizing, somebody who could get him there dressed on time and prepared.
It was because of struggling at jobs and at a specific job. And I knew at that point I wasn't ready to jump back into another job while I was trying to figure myself out and why it was so hard for me to have jobs. And in the work I was doing, I was really good at it and enjoyed it, but I was very in depth and slower paced than what they would expect of me. And productivity is a value of the society, right? Mostly it was the productivity that made it difficult to work because I couldn't keep up. I was working, in my final job, in that last job that let me go, I was working overtime without reporting it so that I could keep up. And trying to hide the fact that I was struggling.
I would not go out the community. I would sell Avon, Java, Tupperware, and they would bring it to the house, and I would go to your house and do like games. And so I would sell you Avon, Java, or Tupperware because that's what I was working on. That was my job. So we would do it. We would put the Avon on like on Thursday, and the Avon will come on Sunday, and the Java also, and the Tupperware.
Like I had an actual corporate job, and they were just so inflexible about making it work for me, so that I couldn't do the job because it couldn't be accommodated.
So me just listening to some of these stories, I almost like can feel like the outside world asking us like, why should we accommodate you? Sometimes it's like easy to, someone who does not walk, of course we need to accommodate so they can get into the building safely even. But there's other types of situations that need accommodations, and I sort of feel like the working world, I don't know, the society, people around us asking, why should we accommodate? Why don't you change? Right. Like they can't understand that we can't change because that's what a disability is. We want to contribute, so let's listen to what people say contribution means to them.
After I left employment, I've done many, many things that I hope contributed to a better planet. I mean, I volunteered for the Rio Grande Nature Center State Park, and I have had respite kids and a foster daughter. He was not really an official foster daughter, but she lived with us for 14 years. And things like that I feel like have made a difference in some people's lives. And that to me is contributing.
I think contribution is giving part of yourself, whether it be financial or emotional or physical. giving part of who you are to the greater community is probably the best way I can describe contribution.
You contribute to the economy by just giving back your time and your presence to somebody, make somebody their day, by smart them or just talk about it. So you gotta contribute to people, but by just giving back material or your money or your resources, but it's back, just your time and your presence, because we all really, our vibration can just make somebody's day.
I was doing like a lot of volunteer work. So I was working with like an animal shelter, and it went good. It went okay. I mean, they told me what to do, so I would follow that and everything. And it was not. It was like learning and training, and getting the experience.
Pre-COVID, I would say it was looked down upon because, again, why should we give you accommodations? Why should we bend over for you to be able to work? Which I sort of find interesting because we're a very work-oriented society. That's how we fund our economy, and making jobs hard to work at or impossible to work at, even though someone has the capacity to do so. Anyway, COVID hits and everyone has to go home because everyone's sick. And that was so unfortunate and scary. I know it is because I had to do that. And I had to wonder where the next paycheck's coming from, or do I have a job? So I even want to just say COVID helped us understand this a little bit better so that we could be more accommodating, but it wasn't necessarily for the people living with disabilities. End rant. So some of us spoke about experiences dedicating time to work, which may not pay actual money. So let's hear about some of these unpaid experiences.
I'm doing public awareness, like working in public, and tell people what autism is, so they can know who I am and have a job.
There was a period in time where I ran a program for people with mental illness in a community setting, and most of us didn't work. But we gardened and we had potlucks and we shared food with each other, and we went to do laundry together. We went shopping together, and we were part of each other's lives. We were building each other up by our presence. And so that was one way of contributing, was just to be a part of our community. And I think contribution is giving part of yourself.
I do believe that there is passive contribution. For example, my husband has some disabilities now, dementia, et cetera, and was in a very bad place for a long time, which put me in the position of being caretaker, which was very meaningful to me. He is my rock. He is the center of my life. Even though he was not out there doing volunteer work or whatever, he was certainly contributing to my life.
I love to work a lot. I don't have a job yet, but I love working on hobbies and goals to accomplish, and I'm super ambitious to get these done.
So in schools and corporate jobs, there's a lot of talk about accommodations and how by changing some aspect of the work requirements, someone who otherwise would not be able to do it could do the work with the accommodation. This sounds good in theory, but I think people with disabilities don't seem to always be on that same line of thought. And I wonder if that, plus what we heard about other people's job experiences, shows that the idea of just barely accommodating differences is not really a solution. because it doesn't really include us fully and it doesn't unblock our full potential to contribute. It feels more like a way of saying, it's okay if you do less.
Okay, so what about all those disability employment programs? The government's always encouraging people living with disabilities to get connected and go to job fairs.
There's a whole funding stream for disability employment. And I think it's built around kind of an ironic starting point, an ironic core, so to speak. Because part of the government, as I said, defines disability as not being able to work for money. So it's sort of going against itself. It recognizes that the economy is set up to exclude us, but then it tries to overcome that with the right mix of training and to fit us in better and adding accommodations. And maybe it does work for some people, but the core of the irony is that many of us can't fit those jobs no matter how much training and accommodation there is. So in an extreme, it's saying it's okay if you do nothing. And I don't think anyone really wins.
Let's listen to some views about the whole system being broken.
I think our society judges people by work and not work. People are labeled disabled because they can't work. One of the things I do, instead of saying, what do you do for your job? I say, what occupies your time? To reframe that thing that, like, I may not be working, but I volunteer at church and I take the dog for a walk and I go to water exercise and there's a lot of things that occupy my time that aren't work. But our society is focused on work. Where do you work? What do you do for a living? How do you contribute to society through work? I think being someone who's been on disability and unable to work for many years, and then getting to a point where I can work nearly full time, it's been quite a journey. And I'd like to think that I've contributed to a lot of things and a lot of people in a lot of places, even without the paycheck, even without the acknowledgement that, yes, I am working. And so I think that it's an identity issue about who we are and can we be that person even if we're not working? And I think we can.
We all have different ways that we're able and capable of contributing. No one person, there's no one right way to contribute. We all have different ways that we're able to contribute. I feel like that with the right supports, and anything is possible. Yeah. We're all unique in our own way. We all need different support. We all have different ways that we're able to contribute.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the federal government defines, at least for taxes and stuff, it defines disability as not being able to earn an income. Like that's strictly the definition. And that's one thing that Carol was saying, that how she was thinking of it earlier. But that's not the only definition of disability.
Well, and it's hard because to qualify for disability, you can't work. But if you're not working, you can't support yourself. So people get stuck. I see this a lot at work where people get stuck. Like they're like, I need disability. I can't work, but I got to work because I can't take care of myself. I can't find food. And I think it's a great disservice to look at it that way and look at it as black or white. You're working or you're not working. Because there's a lot more that goes into it than just, are you working, are you not working?
But I think that work should be something that we enjoy, but also, that it fits with, that we need accommodation. That disabled people, neurodivergent people are going to need accommodations to work sometimes or often. And that's still something that's very, well, we know that a lot of places will just do the bare minimum for the books, right? Just to make it look like they're doing what's needed for requirements. It's not necessarily about what the person needs to actually feel like they can work. If we can't contribute to this machine, then we can't be a part of it, that we get othered and out, put on the outside if you're unable to do enough to keep up with it. I was treated differently when I had economic privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I think his name, Jay Krishnamurti. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but if I don't quote this right, I'm sorry, but it's not a measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. It takes a lot of individuals just starting to face ourselves and face the reality of the situation to start, and to listen to people who are getting most oppressed.
By the very nature of being a human being, we have the right to contribute. Whether or not we have the support or the opportunity to contribute is really the question, because I know, especially in rural New Mexico, there is so much less opportunity to be, maybe because of transportation issues or a lack of support, whatever it may be. There's some issues out there that even if somebody is really got a desire to contribute to the town or the village or the city, it's difficult to have that opportunity to be part of the community.
We started with the 3 dimensions of time, money, and contributions. It's hard to put together what we've learned into any solid conclusion. But one thing that comes out to me, that seems to come out from everyone, is that those 3 dimensions, 1 being doing work, what you do with your time, 2 being getting paid or not, and 3 contribution towards the greater good. Those 3 dimensions need to be unlocked from each other. You need to be able to have money regardless of anything else. And you need to be able to contribute regardless of anything else. Disability wouldn't condemn a person to poverty.
So this has been a really interesting conversation. It definitely needs to continue. So we want to invite you to reach out, send us your thoughts. Send an email to whatifnewmexico, no spaces, @gmail.com. That's whatifnewmexico@gmail.com. And let's keep this conversation going. Join us next week for episode 5, and we're going to talk about appearances, labels, and judgments.